years ago, as I was touring through the southeastern states with my one-man show, Moliere Than Thou. And somebody came up to me after a particularly good show and said, you know, you really ought to submit your resume to the local Shakespeare Festival because I understand that they're still looking for their Macbeth. Angels and ministers of grace defend us. And it struck me at the time because nobody ever looked at me before and said, hey, there's our Macbeth. Angels and ministers of grace defend us. You can say that too, by the way. Angels and ministers of grace defend us. It's from Hamlet, but it wards off all of the evil spirits that comes anytime anybody says the word Macbeth. Excellent. So I started thinking at that time, I started thinking about all those great roles that I was now starting to grow into, all those great Shakespeare roles, now that I was no longer quite the dweeby undergrad theater major that I had always thought of myself as, but was growing into a dweeby middle-aged man. And I thought all those great Shakespearean parts, and wouldn't it be cool to change my performance tour into an audition tour, and I could go around to all the Shakespeare festivals and audition for these roles, and wouldn't it be amazing if no matter what shows they were doing, I would have a monologue ready from those shows, so that I could walk in and say, what, you're doing Coriolanus and Pericles and Henry VI, Part 5? Great, let me do those for you. And so I started memorizing. And as I memorized, the idea of the audition tour kind of fell by the wayside, as many of my harebrained schemes often do. And I started thinking of this more as being a parlor game, or a workshop, or a book, or ultimately, a one-man show. And as I thought about it being a one-man show, I thought, what possible order could I put these things in to make some kind of sense of it for the audience? I could put them in chronological order, in the order that the events of the plays supposedly happened in time. Or I could put them chronologically in the order that Shakespeare wrote the plays. Or I could put them in the order within which they happen in their respective plays, the Act 1 monologues through the Act 5 monologues. Or, let's say I could just put it to a vote, and people could vote on their favorite Shakespeare plays, and I would do the most popular ones, which might make the Democrats happy. Or, let's say I could treat it like the rock concert, and people could call out requests for their favorites, and I could do the favorites of the people who shout the loudest, which might make the Republicans happy. But ultimately, I decided, screw it, I'm going to do it entirely at random. Within this bingo cage are 44 ping-pong balls, each representing either one of Shakespeare's 38 plays or one of 6 of his sonnets, and whatever ball comes out the chute, that sounds disgusting, but it's really not. That is the monologue that I will perform. Now, since this precludes any possibility of a narrative thread to guide us through the course of this evening, I am going to make a game out of it. And as you all came in, you were all given what look like bingo cards, but which are really Iago cards. And the first person to match up with the monologues that I am performing for across, or up and down, or on a diagonal, is going to win this fabulous Lot O Shakespeare t-shirt! Now, in order to expedite this and get in as many monologues as we possibly can, I am going to somewhat arbitrarily limit myself to a one-sentence introduction to each of these monologues, if only to demonstrate how very accessible these plays are, as opposed to their reputation that they are somehow distant or confusing or difficult. I wonder, how did they get that reputation? Oh yes, there we go. What we're going to see up here is the occasional excerpt from the folio edition of Shakespeare, and you can read along as I perform them, and by the end of the evening you will be fluent in Shakespearean, or Shakespearese, or Shakespearanto, if you will. And every now and again what you will see is one of these yellow boxes. If you see a yellow highlighted box, that is your cue, if you can read it from where you are, to simply shout out the line back at me so that we can have a little bit of an interchange going. And if you're in a position where you can't quite read it from where you are, simply shout out whatever's on your mind at that moment. It'll probably work. exceptions to this process. One is, I will retain veto power over any particular monologues if we seem to be getting a lot of the same brand of monologue one after another. A lot of history plays, or a lot of sonnets or problem plays, or if we get a lot of like shouty, screamy monologues, one right after the other, I need to preserve my voice so that it still operates at the end of the evening. Or the other option is, I am available for bribery. If anybody cares to kick in, say, the cost of a beer, I will happy to do whatever monologue you request. And so, without further much ado, I am going to spin my ball.